Well, welcome everybody. We're back for our study in the book of Genesis. Before we get into our review, I'd like to ask a question because we're really studying about Abram and Sarai. We're going to learn some more people. We're going to meet Hagar tonight, and we're going to meet Ishmael. Ooh, wow. What do you think? How do you think Jesus feels about sinners? How's that for a loaded question? Sad? What do you think Jesus thinks of sinners?
He loves us.
He loves them. He loves us. We're the sinners.
Right.
Absolutely loves us. And what?
Well, yeah.
Well, what else?
And he forgives.
He forgives us. He loves us. He forgives us. And what?
We're part of him, really.
Yep, we're an extension of Christ. Absolutely.
Right.
What does Jesus do with sinners? We said
Saves
forgive them. He saves them.
Saves him.
But does he leave us there?
No.
What does he do with us about when it comes to being sinners?
Changes.
He calls us to repentance. Repentance simply just means turn and go the other way. He does require us to stop sinning. All right. Yet, stop sinning.
Not singing.
Yep.
You
Yep.
can
Sing all you want. In fact, I was playing the guitar tonight. We'll sing if you guys want to. You guys can sing now if you like. All right. But sinning means falling short of God's glory. And that's the reason why Christ had to die. It's because of our sin. Throughout the Bible, we'll meet great sinners. Great sinners. We're studying a couple of the great sinners right now. Even though God calls them people of faith, of great faith. One of the most famous stories in the New Testament regarding Jesus' love for sinners and how he feels about us is in the book of John. And I'm going to read it to us. And then we'll go into our review. This is John chapter 8. And I'm going to begin in verse 1. So if you want to, you can look at, you can go to the book of John. John is the fourth book of the Gospels in the New Testament. So it goes Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. And it rolls into the Acts, Romans, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, all the way through. But we're looking just at John chapter 8. So if you can find Matthew. You know, when I was a kid in my church, way over here, Joe. Yeah, there's Mark. So keep going right until you find John. There's Luke. One more book. A little more.
What is it, John 1?
John chapter 8. My favorite number. Now you're looking for John 8. So you can see you're at John 4. We used to do these things called Bible drills when I was in Sunday school as a kid. And you got a prize. So you had to close your Bibles, and then the teacher would yell out a certain scripture, and you had to race to get to it.
The scripture, just the scripture?
Yeah, it'd say something like, Matthew 28, 19, 20.
Okay.
Boom, 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 boom. Matthew,
John 8, verse 1.
or later on, quote a scripture and then tell you, then you have to come and look for it. So you had to say, for example, go ye therefore make disciples of all nations and stuff like that, and that's Matthew 28, 19. All right. Now, Terry, do you want us to wait for you?
That's okay.
Because you got a long way to go.
I've been back and forth.
You're in the Old Testament. You got to go, Gail, could you help her with that? You got to go, oh, yeah, you're making it. What book you in now?
Matthew.
Good. Now keep going right.
That's Mark, Luke,
Matthew.
and John.
Right. So now what book you in?
There's Luke.
One more.
I'm going a little too far.
Yeah, it's okay.
John.
John 8.
John 8. Okay.
Very good. So John 8, verse 1. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people were gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. See, now, mind you, they're going to try to trip him up here. I mean, he can't be the Messiah if he's going to disagree with Moses, right? Moses is the great teacher. And for the Jews, Moses is the most important one. So they're waiting to see what Jesus is going to do. Remember, Jesus is God. And he gets to override everything. But watch how it works. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "If any one of you is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her." Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. Verse 9. At this, those who heard him began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "And neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." These Pharisees were correct. The law of Moses says that she's supposed to be stoned, which means she's supposed to be killed for being caught in adultery. It's a violation of one of the Ten Commandments. They're absolutely right. But the law of love overrides the law of Moses. So how does Jesus address them?
Yes, them if their sin is.
If you guys are without sin, because you should be stoned too, all right? Anyone who is without sin, cast the first stone. By the way, there was somebody there without sin. Jesus himself. Jesus himself. All right? He just simply says to them, really? Yeah, right. Okay, you can stick with the law of Moses. But then you got to make sure that your house is clean first. We're taught in the New Testament also that when we see that we have criticism for somebody else, focus on the beam in our own eye versus the sawdust in our brothers. And that's Jesus here. But what I really appreciate about this too is that after all the accusers leave, by the way, notice who leaves first?
The elders.
The elders. They realize it right off the bat. It's the younger people that aren't so sure. Wait.
Same thing today.
Same thing today.
The older ones will leave right away.
Well,
and the young ones are like,
I think the elders.
"I didn't really do anything bad."
The elders are smart enough. They're wise enough to realize that they had stepped into it. This was a mistake. Look how Jesus addresses her. Where are your accusers?
Girl left.
They're gone. Because she's stunned. She's anticipating that she's about to be killed.
Yeah.
By the way, just for the fun of it takes two to tango.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah.
Where's the guy? Isn't he an adulterer also? So, needless to say.
Yeah, I never could figure that out either.
Oh, there's a lot of sexism. By the way, Jesus is the first and greatest feminist. Just keep it in mind. Jesus is the first and greatest feminist. He did more to free women, all right, than any man in history. So, with all due respect to Gloria Steinem. But look how it finishes. Right after she says, "No one, sir," all right, what does it say?
Tells her to go live her life. And leave your life of sin.
And sin no more.
Same thing.
Neither do I condemn you. When there is no condemnation for those in Christ Jesus, the Bible tells us. There is none. There's no guilt. All right? We're in a room here full of Catholics and Jews. Right? We all like to debate which group actually has mothers who use guilt more than anything else. Jews, we like to say that's a very common trait amongst Jewish mothers. Catholics, I say it's a very common trait amongst Catholic mothers.
I'm not Catholic, though.
All right, all right. So you get to be the excuse.
You're the odd one.
Yeah. So you're the one that gets to go.
I'm the other.
You're the other. And so,
A good one.
but there is no condemnation in Christ Jesus. There is condemnation outside, and that's done by the Father after death. But Jesus says, "Go now and leave your life of sin." Wow. So he does hold her accountable. So God is very loving, very forgiving, all right, but does hold us accountable. there is a ramification for sin, even for believers. Okay? So now let's go 3,000 years further in the past. And let's go to Genesis. We're in Genesis chapter 16 tonight, but we were in Genesis chapter 15 last week. And as you guys turn back to Genesis, I will talk a little bit about that. All right, Joe's already there.
Abraham's wife.
Yeah, we did. We in chapter 15, or you're in 16, right? You're going to be reading about Sarai, right?
You're in 17?
I'm going to be in 15 right now, but 16 is what we're doing tonight. So in 15, this is what happened. God visits Abram. Tells him not to be afraid. Mike likes to tell us that that's the number one thing that God tells us in the Bible. Fear not, do not be afraid. I am your shield, the shield of Abraham. All right? For your very great reward. And Abraham said, oh, Sovereign Lord, where are my children that you keep promising? Remember, God keeps telling Abram and Sarah, that you're going to have so many children you can't count them. God reiterates that here. In verse 6, Abram believed the Lord, and he credited to him as righteousness. We read about that in the New Testament. We read about that in Galatians and in Romans, how Abraham was credited for his righteousness. And then God talks to him about what I have done for you and what I'll continue to do. But Abram said, O Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will not gain possession of the land that God was promising him? So the Lord said to him, bring me a heifer, a goat and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. And if you remember, Abram sacrifices them and lays the halves on two sides. And then this is the beginning of the Abrahamic covenant. This is the promise God is going to make to Abraham. So Abram brought all these to him, cut them in two, and arranged them in halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. Then the birds of prey came down on the carcasses, but Abraham drove them away. So I'm now in verse 12. As the sun was setting, Abram fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated 400 years. But I will punish the nation they serve as their slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. And what was he talking about? What is God talking about there?
Moses in Egypt.
Right. He's talking about the Hebrew children. These are Abraham's descendants will be enslaved in Egypt and would be for over 400 years. And Moses would have to come and rescue them. And God says this to Abraham. You, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age. In the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. Remember, Abram is in the promised land. He's in what we call Israel today. When the sun had set and darkness had fallen, this really freaky thing happens. A smoking fire pot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, made a promise, made a contract, a deal, and said, to your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, to the land of Kenites, Kenizzites, Cadmonites, Hittites, Perizzites, Rephaites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgashites, Jebusites, and that was all the sites. Can you see the smoking pot floating, going between the halves? This was this is like how we sign a contract today, where you put a seal on something. That's how it was done in those days. And really the message was God saying to Abram, if I break my promise, let me be like these animals, slaughtered. Same thing for Abram. So this is the promise God makes to him. Very, very powerful. All right, any questions before we move on? All right. Remembering Jesus and what he taught us with the woman who was caught in adultery. Now we read about Hagar and Ishmael. You've already seen Abram and Sarai sin, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. What have they done?
Lied.
They lied.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, they lied. No, but not to anybody big, right? Not to anybody important, right?
king, wasn't it?
Just the Pharaoh of Egypt.
Oh, Pharaoh was
Yeah,
the
yeah.
king.
No big deal. Just the Pharaoh of Egypt. All right. And once again after that, he did. All right. So they have some trust issues. There are some problems. They're sinners. All right. And they're under God's covenant. So they're sinners. Fortunately, they'll never sin again, right? Hopefully. Well, it's not going to last much longer. So let's begin. So we're in chapter 16 of Genesis. And I'll begin reading in verse 1. Is everybody ready? Okay. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children. But she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I could build a family through her." Just want you to keep in mind, anybody else having problems like this, doing it their way, getting their husband involved, all kinds of stuff like that? Okay. Abram agreed. Oy. Shugana?
Yeah.
Abram, yeah, but I've read this story before somewhere. Gee, somebody did something that God didn't want them to do, and then they gave it to their husband, and he, being like a knucklehead, accepted it instead of saying, no. That would be it, Adam and Eve. That's right. Boy, it sounds so familiar. Abram agreed to what Sarah said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, when Sarai knew that Hagar was pregnant, Hagar began to despise Sarai, her mistress. Then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering." So that's a twist, right? Because in the garden it was the other way around, right? Adam blamed Eve. "I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your servant is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so Hagar fled from Sarai. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was a spring that is beside the road to Shur. And the angel of the Lord said, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and where are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress Sarai," she answered. Then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count." Sounds like a familiar covenant. Mm-hmm. The angel of the Lord also said to her, "You are now with child, and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He," that being Ishmael, "will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers." So she gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." That is why the well was called Beer Shalai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave him the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. All right. Joe was talking to me a little bit before the study. In his study Bible, he's starting to pick up on some of the things they do with it. And one of those things is that these names have meanings. Do you remember any of them?
No.
Okay, you want to look for them again?
No.
Okay. Oh, thank you for your honesty. But these names have meanings. All right?
Yeah, he said he just didn't have Ishmael.
Oh, about his age, 99?
No. The names of
he said the name.
for example, Isaac. Isaac means what? It's actually, the Hebrew is Yitzhak.
Isaac, it says right here, yeah.
Yeah, what does it mean? What does it mean?
It means,
That was the one before, isn't it?
And if you find Abram, tell us what that one means, or Abraham.
Yeah, he had them all together.
That's okay.
Abraham means exalted father, yeah.
There you go. Exalted father.
Father of many.
Father of many. That, by the way, he got that name before any of the children come.
He means God hears. Ismael means God.
Ishmael means God hears. Okay? So, and Yitzhak, Isaac means laughter. Remember, Abram and Sarah both laugh when they hear God tell them Sarai at her late age would have children. Okay? So here we go. We're back to verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian maidservant named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Let's start up by giving Sarai a break here. Decades have passed now since God has made the promise. She is obviously getting old. How much do we really want to blame her for losing faith in God? She's considered a great woman of faith. She's in Hebrews 11, the faith chapter.
Did you say how much we want to blame her?
Yeah, do we really want to blame her? It's been decades now.
Since she had any children.
Right, and there's lots of other women having children all around her.
Maybe because she was just mad at God because she didn't have any children.
See, I'm going to go right in that way, Lynn. I'm going to go with you right that way. I think we all at one time or another are mad with God, or angry with God. All right? I can't really blame her very much. Not as a sinner, I can't. God can, and we'll see what God does about this.
Yeah, especially right after she sends her husband to her servant, and boom, the servant gets pregnant.
And,
All the years of being with Abraham, nothing.
all right,
Sarah, yeah.
yeah, right. And Hagar responds in a negative way once she realizes she's pregnant. She looks down on her boss. This is her boss.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly it, Lynn. All right? And she's just looked down on her. Because, by the way, especially in this time period, a woman's identity is her maternity. All right? And men, too. Remember, we're going to read about, next chapter, we're going to read about circumcision. Of all the places God is going to put his sign on us, for men, it's our paternity, our ability to reproduce. I know kind of yucky, but that's it, really. So here now, Sarai, out of desperation and a lack of faith, does something I think that we all do. All right. Remember, I read the woman caught in adultery. Okay. This is adultery. Sarai is causing it. And by the way, the Bible tells us that God hates divorce. God hates adultery. God hates sin. All sin. So this is an issue here. All right.
Yeah, there's a lot of sinning going on there.
Yep. Where's this woman from? Where's Hagar from?
Egypt.
Egypt. So most likely, remember when Abram and Sarai were in Egypt? That's when Abram said that she's my sister. Remember when they were coming out? He came out pretty rich, didn't he? Lots of people came with him. Possibly Hagar was one of the ones that were given to him by Pharaoh. Possibly. But it's real interesting to see this is how it begins to work. All right. Hagar. A lot of women today named Hagar?
No, I've always thought that was a man's name.
Same here. In fact, isn't there a famous comic?
I don't know, but I've heard of
I want to say there's a famous comic named with Hagar. Yeah. So you can see that she's not considered to be one of the great women of faith. We're going to find out something different here real soon. All right. Excellent. Abram agreed to what Sarah said. That's all in the man. 100%, right? We went through this with Adam and Eve, right? Didn't we say, didn't we put extra emphasis on Adam? Because God had talked to him specifically, told him, you can eat of any tree of the garden, but you cannot eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Specifically tells him that. Okay? His responsibility to teach his wife and hold his wife accountable. That's what his responsibility was, and Adam failed. That's why we say Adam fell.
That's where sin begins, right?
This is where sin begins. That's the original sin.
Yeah.
Sin begins when Eve, listens to the serpent, takes the fruit, eats of it, and then gives it to her husband. Of course, he should have blowing the whistle right there, says, stop. And I do firmly believe that Adam was right there through the whole time and could have stopped it. Here's Abram's moment. And he's weak. All right, so after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian maidservant Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. We read about that too in the early part of Genesis. That men would take multiple women to be their wives. He slept with Hagar, and despite the sin, God gives him a blessing. At least at first. When she knew she was pregnant, when Hagar knew that Hagar was pregnant, Hagar began to despise Sarai, her mistress. So there's a lot, you can unpack that. You can talk about a lot about that. This is not Hagar's husband. She is, there may have other things that Hagar may have wanted in her life. Then again, there's some very positive things about belonging to Abram. But most importantly, I think most scholars believe that it was just that Hagar really looked down on Sarai. What do we got you around for? Abram's now my husband. Then Sarai said to Abram, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Well, first of all, when Sarai says to Abram, you are responsible for the wrong I am suffering, is she right? We got a no, we got a no. Gail says no. Joe, what do you think? Is it when Sarai says to Abram, you're responsible for the wrong I am suffering, is Sarai right or wrong? Blaming Abram for this suffering because Hagar despises her now.
No.
I got a no, a no, a no, a no.
No.
No? Okay. No? All right, so y'all are no's. I say absolutely. Not only is he guilty, he's guilty of sin. All right, that's an inside joke for the chiefs in the mess here. All right?
He's guilty, but it's not his fault. She was pushed at him. And what man isn't going to go unless he's really with his wife?
Boy, it's a good thing you and I weren't married, because if you come into me and said, hey, honey, fine, sleep with whomever you want, you would say that?
No, I would never say that.
Okay, all right, but if you
I
did...
would say you were going to be minus something.
Right, and rightfully so, But if you were to have said that, or let's say not even that, how about if I believed it?
But in those days, they had multiple wives.
Not this group. This group don't. They're not supposed to.
Okay.
God's already talked about that.
Okay. Did we cover that?
Well, actually, it goes all the way back to Genesis. When a man shall leave his family, and a woman leave her home, and the two shall be one.
Okay.
That's it.
That's it.
Yep, that's it.
Before it was just produce. And
Right.
fill
Well,
up the
but remember
earth.
that was in the time of Abraham,
Yeah,
Adam and
way
Eve.
back.
So, all right. But we still read before about how men still ignored that, still took
Yeah.
many, and then God didn't bless it. Why do you think I'm saying it's Abram's fault? He's absolutely right. She's absolutely right.
Because he knew it was wrong.
He's the leader.
Yeah, he's a leader.
God's appointed him and will hold him personally accountable for this. I'm sorry, I agree. I think she's right. Now, I don't think she's the one that should be throwing it
Apparently
around.
He didn't ask God what he should do.
Right.
Maybe that's why.
Now, that's another good point.
Because she said between you and God, leave
Right.
it between you and God.
Right, well,
And there's nothing that says that he did ask God whether he
Right.
should or he shouldn't.
well, she's talking about let God judge between you and me. Which one of us is right?
Oh, she's talking about judging.
Yeah, I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. Who is right? What do you think God would say? Uh-huh.
Oh, in that case, yeah. They blame Abram.
It started with Abram. No, Sarah's still guilty,
Yeah, she's guilty, but
right? But,
it'd be his fault.
right. But he'd go to Abram first, just like he went to Adam first. He went what for? Remember, it was in the cool of the day. God was walking in the cool of the day in the garden. Calls out for Adam, and they're hiding.
That's right. Called out for Adam.
Okay, it is Abram's responsibility. Verse 6, your servant is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. So now Abram passes it back on to Sarai. Nobody wants this hot potato. And then what does Sarai do? Mistreats her servant. I'm still having a hard time finding Christ in any of this.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see Jesus in any of this so far?
In that?
Yeah. What we read about Jesus and the woman caught in adultery, are you tracking any of that in this?
No.
No, neither am I. You see what I'm saying? We're still looking for God in this, aren't we?
Yeah, I know it.
Aren't these people really close to God? Sound like you and me. I know it sounds like me. You know, I'm pretty weak. You know?
We're all weak.
Yeah.
We're all weak.
I can identify with these guys. I have a hard time identifying with Jesus, but I'm supposed to be more like Christ. And at least for me, that's what I'm seeing here. So verse 6, your servant is in your hands, Abram said. Do with her whatever you think best. No. Come on. Be a man. Make a decision. Huh? Get some huevos. Grow some cojones. Right? We're doing our Spanish thing. Still continuing there. So then Sarah, like Terry said, then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her, left the camp. By the way, because Gail knows about this, we've talked about this before, the concept of divorce is fairly new, really. I mean, the divorces happened throughout history, but it wasn't anything like we have today. All right? And the reason why, a long, long time ago, what would happen if a man divorced his wife and children?
He'd be in trouble.
No, on the contrary.
I thought it was the wife had to give the man, the wife had to tell the man that she didn't want him no more.
A writ of divorce. But no, men divorce women, even in the Wild West. Men divorce women. In fact, after the Civil War, divorce was extremely high.
I didn't know it was the men that was doing it.
What did it mean for the family if a man divorced his family?
They died.
They died.
Ooh.
There were...
Yeah, 'cause the man was taking care of them.
He's
gone.
farmer or some kind of producer had to bring in the bacon. All right? The man did the hunting, and the man did whatever it is, and brought it in, and the woman prepared it. All right? That's how it worked. It meant a death sentence. Okay? So somewhere, so when Hagar leaves, pregnant, it's a death sentence. She's out in the wilderness. And it's extremely dangerous. That's how desperate she was. Who comes to see her?
Angel of the Lord.
Oh boy, can we have fun with this term. We can have lots of fun with this term. First of all, it's the definitive article. It's not an angel of the Lord. It's the angel of the Lord. Now that still could be a specific angel. And we've already talked about angels, right? Are angels humans?
No.
Pretty little, babies with wings.
Separately from...
Created before we were.
Yeah.
Right, absolutely, Joe. Created before we were. These are special servants of God. But they're not the little bitty babies with the wings and stuff like that.
No. You can take any shape, form, or...
And they can take lots of different shapes and forms, okay? But they're still loving, wonderful, guardians, stuff like that. They're horrible. They can destroy 1,000 people immediately. They're extremely powerful. They're God's messengers. They are in the Bible. We can go back and do more studies on them. We've studied this before. Angels are very dangerous beings.
Was Lucifer the son of God also?
No, absolutely not.
No, because I think it was in Job. It seemed to put
You
him
got
like
it.
he was
a very high-ranking
yeah,
angel.
He knew just everything about everything.
He was a very high-ranking angel.
Yeah.
And when he rebelled against God, he took a third of the angels with him.
Yeah.
And they became demons.
To this day, yeah.
They became demons. And this is their earth. Satan controls the earth. It belongs to him.
Yeah.
All right, because Adam gave him the keys. All right. So angels, as much again, mind you, there are angels looking out for us. All right. The Bible talks to us that be very careful about how you treat people. You may have entertained angels unaware.
Adam and Eve was created by God, right?
Right. Adam right out of the
And
ground,
then,
Eve
yeah.
right out of Adam.
Then the serpent and all that.
Right. The serpent was Satan,
Satan, yeah.
who is now taking the form of a serpent, which was a
Yeah.
beautiful being in those days.
Yeah.
Right. But he was actually a demon now. All right. But angels are very, very powerful creatures.
I thought the angels were supposed to be loving and helping people, wasn't
I don't know about loving. Definitely helping,
helping.
all right? But they're here. They exist to exalt God and to be his messenger, but they also cause great destruction. They're extremely powerful. It's one of the most amazing things when you think about Jesus on the cross. He could have called down a legion of angels and wiped out mankind, just like that. Very powerful being. So this is the angel of the Lord. So it could be Gabriel.
I was thinking of that, yeah.
It could be Gabriel, who's considered the angel of the
He's
Lord.
the archangel, isn't he?
Right, the archangel Gabriel. So we don't know. This doesn't give us. So let's read about what he does, all right? And then we can talk a little bit about this, because it's not definitive, but it's very interesting. All right. Verse 7. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near a spring in the desert. It was the spring that is beside the road to Shur. Remember, guys, we've been talking about this a lot. This is not a fairy tale. This is an historical document. They're actually using geographic positions to show that they're serious about this. The angel of the Lord said, Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from and where are you going? How many questions are there? 2 questions, right? Let's see how many Hagar answers. I'm running away from my mistress Sarai, she answered.
Answered the first one. Second one.
So why didn't she answer the
She
second
didn't know
one?
where she was
There you go, Michael, got you right in the head.
Yeah.
Right in the head. She has no idea where she's going. She knows where she's running away. And that's the point the angel's making. You don't know where you're going.
No.
She literally is running out to the desert to die. I mean, this is a horrible moment. What Sarai and Abraham have done is a terrible thing. Verse 9. Then the angel of the Lord told her, go back to your mistress and submit to her. Wow. Wow. But that is God. See, now we're seeing Jesus. Right? Now we're seeing Jesus. Because that's what it is. Humility is God. Humility is very godlike. It's a great, great attribute. In verse 10, the angel added, I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. Wait a minute. The angel can do this?
He would have to ask God's permission, wouldn't he?
He sure would.
The angel
The angel
of the Lord.
of the Lord.
Yeah, but he's still just the angel. He's not.
But we don't know.
God.
who
We
the
really
angel
don't
is.
know.
Who is the angel?
Yeah.
Well,
We don't know.
Oh, yeah.
But Mike, you're right. You're still right.
yeah, no.
You know, as I read this, I'd say, yeah, well, I'm still an angel. Maybe because he's the messenger, he is speaking for God. But boy, gosh, the way that's worded, it sounds like the angel's the one that does it.
It's interesting in some respects. Is in the other parts of this, prior to this, God always speaks.
Yeah.
But in this particular case, he sends his angel to speak.
Right. And in a couple chapters, we're going to see 3 visitors coming. And you're going to hear the same kind of conversation. But just in the back of your mind, guys, because we're going to still read about the angel of the Lord. All right? That's kind of interesting. The theologians don't know for certain. They don't know. It could be, again, a manifestation of God, that being Jesus Christ again. Or it's just an angel who's representing God and using terminology where he's representing God. So we don't know. But I just think it's really interesting. All right, but isn't it neat what they're saying? What he's saying? Wait a minute. I've seen this promise before too. Where did I see this?
That was a promise God made with Abraham.
That's exactly right. I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count. TNTC, Gail's a corpsman, but she really wasn't a sick call corpsman, treating patients. She's more a hospital type and then operating room. Okay? But as a guy who used to treat patients, if I did a white blood cell count on you, I would send it to the lab, they'd come back, they have to count the number of white blood cells. All right? It means that the more of those you have, the more likely you have an infection. And if the lab tech couldn't count them all, they just put TNTC, too numerous to count. Okay? Too numerous to count. There it is, too numerous to count. The promise that was made to Abram is also made to a woman. Is this a good thing, by the way?
Kind of strange that her son will be Ishmael, which will be against all brothers.
Yeah,
So-
you got it. It's exactly right.
Okay, so and she's from Egypt.
Yes, that's
So
right.
now, if Ishmael goes to Egypt, hooks up with Pharaoh, this is probably why the 400 years of domination came for the Jewish people.
Have you people ever heard of the Arabs? Guess which line they're coming from?
Ishmael?
Are they causing any problems in the world today?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Not all the Arabs, right? But
No.
it's from the Arabs we get the Muslims.
Right.
That's the prediction here. Muslims believe that it was not Isaac that Abraham was sacrificing. Remember, we're going to read about that later on. Remember, Abraham takes his son Isaac and gets ready to offer him?
Yeah.
They'll tell you it wasn't Isaac. They'll tell you it was Ishmael. That is through Ishmael, God has blessed the earth.
To make their theories right for themselves. That's why it's so screwed up.
And this prophecy's come true. The whole world right now, the whole world's dealing with the fact that the terrorists are threatening everybody.
And ISIS is going to draw the world into a world war.
Yes,
Could
quite
very
easily.
well. Yeah.
Or just a whole Arab state,
Well, yeah.
the whole
that's-
Islamic state.
I was reading on the internet, and it's almost like you're going, oh, here we go, Hitler's up again.
Yep. look at Israel. All right, they're dealing with in the 6-Day War, in the Yom Kippur War. All right, they're fighting Egypt and other Arabs. I'm reading about this in the 16th chapter of Genesis.
There's a lot of things that come back that was happening before. I read in the paper about racism and all that went on. They fought it, they died for it, and it's coming right back.
Oh yeah,
again.
absolutely.
And the other thing is that so many things that were not supposed to happen anymore.
Right. You know, again, remember we talked about World War I. We just had Veterans Day, right? Veterans Day is actually the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, right? November 11th, right? And that came from the armistice that was signed in 1918, ending the First World War. But they didn't call it World War I. They called it the Great War, and the war to end all wars. They didn't bother to read the New Testament because Jesus said, you will always have wars and rumors of wars. Here we are. See, again, if you want to read about what's going to happen in the world, just read the Bible. So there it is. Verse 11, the angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now with child, and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael, which means what?
Okay.
Conqueror.
God hears.
God hears.
Heard. All right? You should name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility toward all his brothers.
Sword.
Yep. That's exactly what Muhammad believed.
Yeah.
When Muhammad came out of the cave, right, he believed that you can spread Islam by the sword.
That's right, yeah.
Verse 13. So Hagar gave this name to the Lord who spoke to her. You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. That is why the well was called Be'er Lahi Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. Verse 15. So Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave him the name Ishmael to the son she had born. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. Curiouser and curiouser. Things are really starting to cook now. Okay? Ishmael is not going to produce the line that produces King David, that eventually produces Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus the Messiah.
Yeah.
He will
Sure.
not. It will be Isaac's line. All right? And we can see it today. We see how the challenges are continuing. Yep. So now, when we go into verse 17, we're going to get further into God's covenant with Abraham. We're going to learn more about these two people, Abraham and Sarah. Where I think I know Joe and Mike. I know a couple folks are reading ahead a little bit, and you start to see how the story develops. And then things are, after the birth of Isaac, things really start hopping. The thing again, remember we started reading tonight about Jesus and about his love for us. That he loves us enough to accept us where we are, but loves us too much to leave us there. He wants us to live a life with him and to live sinlessly. We can't. Paul tells us that. As long as we're in the skin, we will sin. But Jesus will continually forgive us if we ask for his forgiveness. Again, God did it off in the beginning of time. I mean, it's so interesting. We're reading the story about Abram and Sarai, where we see Adam and Eve in it. And then we can look for this and see where do we see Jesus and where do we see man. Okay? Any questions? It's a crazy thing. It's a crazy thing. All right, God bless everybody. See you the next time.